I grew up in the quiet, shadowed folds of Appalachia, where the mountains breathed their own kind of silence, and the trees whispered stories older than anyone could remember. But when I was 15, my family moved deep into the Texas backwoods, into a place the locals avoided, a stretch of land they called the Old Timberline. I didn't understand their fear until much later, until the night the forest breathed. The road to our cabin wound through miles of thick pine woods, the trees leaning in like they wanted to swallow every bit of sky. By the time we reached the clearing where the cabin sat, the sun had already disappeared behind the tree line, leaving behind only a dim orange glow that seemed to fade faster than it should have. The moment I stepped out of the truck, the smell hit me. Damp earth, wet bark, and something else. Something metallic, like old blood, my younger brother. Caleb was 12, full of restless energy that Appalachia had never tamed. He leapt from the truck and ran around the clearing, swinging a stick like he was fighting invisible monsters. Texas woods feel alive, he shouted, but from the moment we arrived, I felt something watching. Not a person, not an animal, something that lived between the trees, something patient, something hungry. On our second day, a man named Briggs came walking up to our porch, grey-bearded, wiry, and wearing a hat that looked like it had survived a different century. His eyes were sharp, but filled with the kind of sadness that comes from knowing too much. "You folks new here?" he asked my mother. She nodded politely. He didn't smile. Instead, he turned toward the woods and raised a trembling finger. "You boys," he said, looking at me and Caleb, "don't wander in there after sunset." "Why?" I asked, half expecting a normal explanation. "Wild animals, snakes, anything." But he only whispered, "Because the forest listens. And when it listens long enough, it remembers." A chill slid through my spine. My mother tried to brush it off with a nervous laugh. "We'll be careful." Briggs shook his head slowly. "Careful ain't enough here." Then he leaned closer to me. "If you hear the woods breathing, don't answer." "What does that even mean?" I asked, genuinely confused. But he walked away without responding, glancing back at the trees like he expected them to move. That night, I learned exactly what he meant. Near midnight, I woke up to a soft thump against the wall. Then another, and another. At first, I thought it might have been a deer rubbing its antlers against the wood. But then the sound changed. It grew deep, rhythmic, slow. Inhale, exhale. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was breathing. The cabin wall expanded and contracted with each breath, as if something giant stood just on the other side. My heart thudded against my ribs as I slipped out of bed and approached the window. The curtain felt heavy in my hand as I lifted it only a little. The trees were swaying. Not with the wind, there was no wind. They swayed in a slow, unnerving rhythm, almost perfectly timed with the breathing I heard against the wall. In the trees leaned forward, out, they drifted back. I stumbled away from the window, terrified. And then, cutting through the darkness, came a whisper, soft, broken, like someone calling from the depths of the forest. Leb. My blood froze. It was calling my brother's name. The next morning, I tried telling Mum what I'd heard. She laughed it off as night noises. Caleb teased me too, calling me paranoid. But that night, he stopped laughing. It was nearly 2 in the morning when the footsteps started. Slow, heavy steps crunching leaves outside our window. Not animal movements. 2 legs. one deliberate step at a time. Caleb sat up in bed. You hear that? Before I could answer, the breathing started again, closer this time. So close it felt like something stood inches from the window pane. Caleb jumped to his feet and reached for the curtain. Don't, I whispered. But it was too late. He peeked through the gap, and I watched the color drain from his face. Something's out there, he whispered, stepping back. What did you see? He swallowed hard. Something tall, taller than the window. It didn't look human. The footsteps moved away, fading deeper into the woods, but right before they disappeared, the whisper came again. Caleb covered his ears, shaking. That's not funny. That's not funny at all. The next day, I noticed something strange about him. He kept staring at the forest like he could hear something I couldn't. It wasn't fear, it was something else. Something like curiosity, or a pull. At one point, he whispered, "Do you feel like the trees are watching us?" My stomach twisted. Stop. No, really, he said quietly. It feels like they know my name. As if on cue, Briggs's old tractor rattled up the road. The moment he saw Caleb near the tree line, he jumped off and hurried toward us. You stay away from there, boy, he snapped, grabbing Caleb's arm. Caleb yanked back. Let go. Briggs held tighter. They've noticed you, he said, voice trembling. This is how it begins. What begins? I demanded, but Briggs didn't tell. He walked away with the same fearful glance at the woods he'd given on the first day. That night, a storm rolled in howling wind, heavy rain pounding the roof, thunder shaking the walls. I woke up to the sound of our front door creaking open. Cold air rushed into the hallway. Caleb, I whispered. His bed was empty. Panic shot through me. I ran to the front door, rain slamming against my face. Through the storm, lightning ripped the sky open, and in that instant of white light, I saw him. Caleb stood barefoot at the edge of the woods, and behind him, towering above him, was a silhouette. Long arms, bent legs, a head tilted unnaturally sideways. Its height reached past the lowest tree branches. The lightning vanished hand, so did they. I ran toward the woods, screaming his name. The mud sucked at my shoes. Leaves slapped my ankles. Rain blurred my vision. I followed his footprints, desperate, heartbreaking with every step. But then, about 15 feet into the forest, the footprints stopped, just ended, as if something had lifted him clean off the ground. The forest around me went silent. The rain softened. The thunder faded. And then I heard it breathing all around me, slow, deep, wet. Something enormous moved between the trees, but I could not see it. I could only feel the air shift with each breath. And then, right behind me, so close I felt the warmth of the whisper against my neck. Leb, I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe. I didn't stop until I slammed the cabin door shut behind me, locking it, pushing a chair against it even though I knew it wouldn't help. The sheriff's search lasted 3 days. They found nothing. Briggs wouldn't talk to them. He wouldn't talk to us either. He only said, "The forest takes who it wants." We moved out 2 weeks later, my mother hollowed by grief, me haunted by every breath of wind that brushed my neck. On our last night, as I stood alone in my empty bedroom, I looked out toward the tree line. The trees didn't move. No wind, no breathing. But just as I turned away, I heard it again, soft, slow, patient, inhale, exhale, then a whisper faint, fragile, drifting out from the deep black spaces between the trees. K-L-E-B. I left the room without looking back. Years have passed, but sometimes on quiet nights, when the darkness feels a little too thick and the world goes unnaturally still, I hear it again, the forest breathing as if it's still waiting for me. I never thought a simple camping trip could change my life forever. But that summer in the deep Texas woods, I learned that some places should never be entered. My friends and I, Jake, Sam and I, had grown up hearing stories about the timberline forest, about people vanishing without a trace, whispers of something watching from the shadows, but we laughed it off. Legends were for scared kids. We were 16, invincible and full of bravado. We arrived just as the sun began to sink behind the horizon. The forest was dense, thick with tall pines whose tops disappeared into the dusky sky. The air smelled of wet pine needles and decay, a heaviness that made my chest tighten. The kind of smell that clings to your skin, and even after washing, seems to linger in your lungs. We set up our tents near a small clearing. Jake was always the daredevil, poking fun at any perceived danger. "Relax," he said. "If anything's out here, it's probably some raccoon or a stray deer. Nothing scary." But when the darkness fully settled, the forest changed. The wind stopped moving, leaving an unnatural stillness. Even the insects went silent, as if holding their breath. It started with a sound so subtle, I almost didn't notice it, the soft snapping of a twig, too heavy to be an animal. Then another and another, gradually closer, moving between the trees. My stomach churned. "Guys," I whispered. "Nothing." The sounds grew louder, rhythmic, measured. Step, pause. Step, pause. It was walking toward us. I tried to reason. Maybe it was a deer, but the pattern didn't match any animal I'd ever heard. The steps were deliberate, careful, human-like, but too long, too heavy. Then came the breathing. Slow, deep, resonant. A wet, dragging inhale and a trembling exhale that seemed to surround the clearing. The kind of sound that fills your ears and makes the air itself feel alive. Jake laughed nervously. Probably just the wind. Right. But the wind had been dead for hours. The trees were perfectly still. We grabbed our flashlights and pointed them toward the tree line. Shadows stretched unnaturally, moving with a rhythm that didn't match the moonlight. Then we saw glimpsed it. A tall figure, hunched, too long-limbed, moving between the trees with terrifying grace. Not human, not deer, but something in between. Its head swiveled unnaturally, catching the moonlight with small, reflective eyes. Sam froze. "What is that?" I wanted to respond, to tell him to calm down, but my voice stuck in my throat. The figure shifted closer. Silent, except for those heavy steps, the breathing, and the faint metallic temps that suddenly filled the air like blood. Jake stepped forward, shining his flashlight directly at the figure. For a moment, the beam caught in its eyes, glowing coal black, deep and empty. The figure jerked back, melting into the shadows, leaving only the sound of its breathing behind. We ran. Without thinking, the forest had changed. Paths we thought we knew twisted and turned in impossible ways. Every turn led us deeper into the heart of the trees, and the forest seemed to close in around us. Branches snagged at our clothes. Mud sucked at our boots, and all the while, We heard it breathing just beyond reach, whispering something unintelligible, calling names that weren't ours. We found a small, abandoned cabin. It looked like it had been left to rot decades ago. The door hung on a single hinge, creaking when the wind moved it. We ran inside, bolting the door behind us. The smell hit us first: wet earth, rot, and something iron-like, metallic, sharp, the kind of smell that makes your stomach churn. The cabin was empty, but the air was thick. On the floor, we noticed footprints. They were enormous, human-like, yet the toes and heels stretched impossibly long. They led from the door to the far corner of the room, stopping suddenly. Sam whispered, voice shaking, It's right outside." I wanted to deny it, to say it was our imagination, but a shadow moved across the cracked wall. Something large, hunched, with limbs too long, moving unnaturally. Every shift cast monstrous shapes that seemed alive, as if the walls themselves were breathing with it. The breathing grew louder. It seemed to seep into the cabin, filling every corner, vibrating in our chests. Then came the whispers, faint but clear, our names, repeated over and over, distorted, dragging across the floor like a cold wind. We tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. We were trapped. Panic overtook us, and in a moment of instinct, Jake grabbed a wooden plank and pushed it against the door. The creature's shadow moved closer, and for the first time, we heard a guttural sound, wet, rasping growl that felt like it came from the very earth. Suddenly, a window broke. A long, thin limb, or maybe more than one, slid through the broken glass, scraping the floor. Something cold touched my arm. I screamed, pulling back, and in that instant, it vanished, leaving only the heavy scent and the sound of its slow, deliberate breathing. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt wrong, stretched like taffy. The storm outside raged, thunder masking the creature's movement, but I knew it was circling, waiting, patient. At dawn, the wind returned, the air shifted, and the forest fell silent. The creature was gone. The cabin door swung open, revealing the familiar, mud-slick clearing. We ran. We didn't stop until we reached the road, where a passing car stopped just in time to see four pale, mud-streaked teenagers collapse onto the asphalt. Gasping for air, the sheriff found nothing when he searched later. No footprints, no sign of the creature, not even disturbed foliage. Only the cabin remained, silent and rotting, as it had never been touched by anyone or anything, even now. Years later, I can't forget the way the forest moved, the way it breathed, and the eyes that had caught the light of our flashlights that night. Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed and the wind is unusually still, I swear I hear it again. A slow, deliberate inhale and exhale from somewhere just beyond the trees, and faintly whispering my name, calling me back to the woods. Some things aren't legends. Some things are very real, and some things wait, patient, hidden in the dark, breathing, watching, and remembering. I thought I had seen the worst the woods could offer. After everything that happened that summer with Caleb and then with my friends, I believed I could never be caught off guard again. But one autumn evening, years later, I returned to Texas alone, drawn back by a strange mix of curiosity and unease. The old timberline had a way of pulling people in. Even now, I understand why the sun was low when I drove down the dirt path that led to the edge of the forest. The trees seemed taller than memory, their tops twisting together so tightly that the sky looked like a small, distant sliver. The air smelled of wet leaves, decayed wood, and something iron-like, faint but unmistakable. My chest tightened the moment I stepped out of the truck. The forest seemed to exhale, a slow, deliberate breath that moved through the clearing and into my lungs. I had no intention of staying overnight. Just a short hike to revisit the spots I remembered, the clearing where Caleb had vanished, the abandoned cabin where my friends had fled. But the deeper I went, the more the woods seemed to shift around me. Paths I thought familiar twisted unexpectedly, and every now and then I would catch movement in the corner of my arja branch, bending too smoothly, a shadow too thick, a shape too long-limbed to be human. As I moved farther into the forest, I noticed the air growing colder. My breath came out in mist, even though it was a warm day. Every step I took pressed me deeper into an unnatural silence. No birds, no insects, no wind, just the occasional creak of branches, as if the trees themselves were adjusting to my presence, shifting slightly to watch me pass. I began to feel it again, the watching, the awareness that I had once thought I imagined. Then I heard the sound, at first subtle, like the forest was sighing, then stronger, closer, deliberate. It was breathing, slow and wet, the kind of sound that vibrates in your chest and seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My heart pounded, and a memory from that night years ago flashed through my mind. Caleb's name whispered by the dark, that impossible, tall figure emerging from the trees. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, that my memory was playing tricks. But then came the whispers, faint but clear. Words I didn't recognize at first, but slowly they shaped themselves. Names, my name. The voice was rough, guttural, almost dry, as if it had come from a throat that had never spoken before. Come, back, come. A rustle to my left made me snap around. Shadows twisted among the trunks. A shape emerged, not fully visible, but long and wrong, moving with the unnatural fluidity I remembered. I froze. The creature was taller than any man, its limbs bent at impossible angles, its head tilting unnaturally as it stepped closer. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, not with malice exactly, but with a cold intelligence that made me understand I was intruding. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. Every step I took seemed to take me deeper into the forest, away from safety, as if the trees themselves were guiding me toward it. Then I saw movement behind the creature-long, shadowy forms weaving among the trunks, staying just out of the moonlight. The sound of wet breathing filled the air. Each inhale and exhale seemed to shake the ground beneath my feet. I tried to run, but the forest wasn't ordinary anymore. The path seemed endless, twisting, changing. Each clearing led me to another, denser, darker. The creature followed, silent, patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. I could hear its steps, but when I looked, it was always just on the edge of visibility, never fully revealed. It was patient, intelligent, calculating, and I realized that no scream or fleeing would save me if it decided I belonged to the woods. Suddenly, I reached a small stream. The water was black and still, reflecting nothing but my own terrified face. I paused to catch my breath. That's when I smelled it iron, sharp and wet, stronger than anything I had encountered before. The smell made my stomach heave. Something had been feeding here, or perhaps it had always been here. Something that thrived in the decay of the forest and the fear of intruders. The creature stepped into the moonlight, only partially visible, its form is its long, bent limbs seemed human in part, animal in part, and yet not either. Its skin, or fur, whatever covered it, was slick with moisture, glinting faintly in the dim silver light. I could see the curve of its spine, impossibly long, the hollow of its chest rising and falling with deliberate breaths. Its eyes met mine for a moment, coal-black, infinite, unblinking. And in that moment, I felt the forest itself lean toward me, as if alive, sensing my fear, judging my presence. I ran. I didn't look back. Branches tore at my jacket, mud sucked at my boots, and the sound of wet breathing followed me, echoing through the forest, surrounding me like a living thing. Every turn brought me deeper into darkness. Every step was met with silence. Then the whispering voice calling again, soft, distant, yet unmistakably real. Eventually, I found the cabin. It was just as I remembered: draughting wood, broken windows, the heavy smell of decay. I slammed the door behind me, leaning against it, panting, listening. For hours, I thought I was safe. The wind returned, carrying the normal sounds of the forest back with it. But the creature didn't leave. I could feel it, even if I couldn't see it. A presence, waiting, patient, eternal. At dawn, the light revealed nothing. No footprints, no disturbance in the undergrowth. Only the cabin, empty and silent. I left the forest quickly, not daring to look back. But the memory stayed. The slow, wet breathing, the whisper circling my name, the cold, intelligent eyes watching from the darkness. Even now, years later, I can feel it sometimes, late at night. When the wind dies down and the world is too quiet, I hear the inhale and exhale of the old timberline, slow, patient, waiting, and I know that somewhere in those woods it still remembers me, waiting for me to return, as it always does, for anyone who dares to enter. Some things are not myths. Some things are real. Some things are patient. And the old timberline remembers everything.